Chapter 29. Enter stage left Daddy Valentine. Standing up at the top of the stairs in the Dursleys' house, Vincent really had to wonder how his son had managed to stay sane here. Listening to their chatter as the fat little kid that dared to claim blood to his son ratted Sephiroth and Genesis out, of course with extreme exaggeration and fake tears. It must have been parental blindness that kept them from seeing the obvious lie. He didn't even need to be a Turk CIA agent to tell the boy was lying out his ass. Shaking his head, he leaned back against the wall, still listening to the pitiful sob story and the fat cow that called herself Marge dotting on the boy. Vernon, charges should be pressed against the boy. He nearly killed poor Dudekin's friend. Oh police. The snot-nosed little 15-year-old had the wind knocked out of him. Vincent had stayed around just in case Sephiroth's strength had gotten the better of him and he had really hurt the boy. The kid, after 5 minutes of lying in the cold snow, had gotten up under his own power, hunched over slightly and breathing hard, but nowhere did he show sign of injury, let alone nearly killed. Host, why do we not simply dispose of these annoying humans? The fat one would burn for a very, very long time. Smirking at the voice inside his head, Vincent peeked around the corner, seeing the fat pig known as Vernon pick up the phone, most likely to call the police. Which fat one? There are 3 that I would not mind roasting at the moment. All? Snorting, Vincent moved back to his son's room and slipped out through the window, video camera clutched in his left hand. Making sure he had his CIA badge on him, he headed out into the street to watch for the police. He would need his badge to keep from getting arrested for carrying Cerberus on his hip. That, and it was his linchpin in all this. He hadn't planned on making a move this early in the game, but the Dursleys were forcing his hand. He moved down a few houses and leaned up against one of the street lamps, his hand flipping open his phone, and quickly dialed Sephiroth. Groaning loudly, a hand blindly groped the bedside table, looking for the obnoxious thing buzzing across the ancient wood. Hearing it vibrate right off the table, Genesis cursed loudly and with many protest against his sore backside, and moving from his personal heater known as Sephiroth, he leaned over and grabbed the cursed device. Seeing it was Vincent, he flipped it open. What the hell did they do now? Well, good morning to you, to sunshine. Bite me, Valentine. Wait. Scratch that, you will. Even though Vincent was still a very quiet man, he did have a playfully side. At least he had developed one over the past few thousand years. Is my son unconscious? Having the phone plucked from his hand, Genesis looked down to the still half asleep and very naked Sephiroth under him. What's going on, Dad? What's your arrest record look like? Snorting, Sephiroth rolled his eyes under his lids and snuggled back into the pillow. This life or last life? You don't want to see Shinra's. Oh, he had gone through a real rebellious streak about the age of 14. He would steal bikes, cars, helicopters. Break into people's homes for the sheer thrill of it. He got quite good as wiggling his way out of handcuffs, much to Genesis' never-ending frustration. You sound like myself when I was a young teen. Vincent had nearly as bad a rep as Reno did. Why, he was recruited into the Turks. He had calmed down a lot as he had gotten older, but he had been a hellion in his youth. Like father, like son, it seemed. You'll have to tell me that story later. Let me guess. They're calling the cops on me, right? Genesis laid back down across Sephiroth's chest, eyes falling shut as he listened to the two-way conversation. With his enhanced hearing, he could hear Vincent just fine, even though the phone was turned way down. Yes, they just arrived at the house. Sighing, Sephiroth pushed himself up, dislodging the orban on his chest. All right, I will be there in a minute. We're about 5 minutes drive. About 7 minutes run. He would probably end up running back, as it wouldn't do well to pull up there in a limo only to have cops jumping his ass. Snapping the phone shut, he signed, pulling himself out of the nice warm bed. They honestly called the cops on you? Genesis was already getting dressed in high-end mall clothing. He only wore his old Shinra attire around Hogsmeade. Pulling his shirt on over his head, Sephiroth snorted, a thought running through his brain. What? Genesis asked, a small smile flickering across his lips as he saw that evil light in Sephiroth's eyes. I should transfigure my clothes back into my old battle leather and go up like that. Yes, yes, do it, do it. Genesis started to laugh hard and quickly pulled out the wand he had made for himself a very long time ago to blend into the wizarding world. Moving over to Genesis, Sephiroth looked over the wand, seeing the very dark red-brown wood covered in runic carvings identical to the ones on rapier. Did you make that or did you buy it? He didn't think Genesis required a wand, but you needed one to blend into the wizarding world. I made it, a very long time ago. We all did. He held it out for Sephiroth to look over. Burnished ebony, 13 inches. Shut up, you know damn well it's advertisement. Smirking, Sephiroth turned it over in his hand. Something was pulling at him. What's the core? Here Genesis flushed slightly and muttered something so low that even with his enhanced hearing he couldn't hear it. Jen, you're mumbling again. Flushing even more, Genesis couldn't meet his eyes. One of your feathers. One of mine. How on earth did you find them? He didn't know Genesis had even been around during Cloud and Genova's final fight on top of Shinra Tower. A couple fell down into the hole where I had sealed myself away below Midja. When I woke up I saw them against one of the rocks. So I kept them. Chuckling softly, Sephiroth pulled Genesis to him, kissing him deeply. Sentimental sap. Laughing, Genesis shoved his head away. Okay, beautiful. Let's bring back the old general. Piers was milking this out as best he could. He and his sister were staying here at the Dursleys while their parents went on a romantic Christmas to the coast of Italy. Honestly, Dudley's parents had to be the most blind people on the planet when it came to that freak cousin of his. They were willing to believe any bullshit story they fed them if it meant getting the boy in trouble. Right now they were sitting in the Dursleys' living room with two officers who were taking down the assault report. Harry did leave a decent-sized bruise across his chest, which was the clincher to his sob story that Harry had brutally attacked him for no reason. One of the officers turned to his mic and leaned in real close, a frown crossing his face. Mr. Dursley, you stated the school your nephew attended was called St. Brutus's Secure Center of Incurably Criminal Boys? His partner looked up from the report he was writing, a brow raised in a silent WTF. Look. Yes, the boy has been going there for 5 years now. Aha. Well, Mr. Vernon, I do not know what you were told, but there is no school in existence in all of Great Britain like that. Oh, Sephiroth was loving this. He was standing up with Genesis and his father up at the top of the stairs, simply listening to the conversation below. For once, officers that weren't completely retarded and bought into Vernon's bullshitting. I assure you the school is real, the boy is mentally unstable. Oh please, Vernon. Can't you see these fine officers are smart enough to see through your bullshit? Everyone jumped slightly, all heads in the room whipping to the entryway. Sephiroth stood leaning up against the archway, arms folded loosely across his chest and feet crossed at the ankles. Genesis had styled his hair once more how it had always been, though it only reached his shoulder blades. Right now he looked like he had at this age. Genesis stood leaning against the stairwell with Vincent standing behind his son. He was currently in a black business suit, much like the Turks' old suits. Was amazing actually how close the Turks and CIA dressed, made the dark gunman feel at home. The one officer stood, his pale green eyes taking in the youth before him. Even though he was dressed strange in that long leather jacket, he gave off a very powerful aura, but it wasn't aggressive. It was the aura of a man that was extremely confident in himself, and those acid green eyes held knowledge beyond what a child his age should have. Some of the contacts these kids wore today were just plain strange. But his son was no different. He liked going to those anime conventions and they had some weird characters there. Harry Potter? The officer asked. His eyes flickered over the other two men that had shown up with the young boy. Sephiroth nodded slightly, pushing himself off the wall and coming to stand at his full height. He was easily several inches taller than the officer. Mr. Potter, we would like to get your side of the events that took place at roughly 9:30 a.m. today. Who are these two men? He motioned towards the two in the entryway. The Dursleys now just noticed the other man standing next to Harry. My two witnesses, both were present when the incident went down. Genesis Rhapsodos was standing with me during the whole event. And Vincent moved past his son, pulling his badge from his back pocket, flipping it open, revealing his CIA ID card and his CIA badge. CIA Agent James Potter, I was present when the incident went down and have video evidence of the event. Sephiroth bit back a laugh, seeing the absolutely horrified looks on Petunia's face. Vincent had changed his features just enough that he resembled the original James Potter. It really wasn't that big of a change. Just a tweak of the nose, a slight rounding of the jaw and changing the eyes to hazel, and he was the perfect doppelganger. He even had the glasses. Agent Potter, any relation to Harry? The officers had gone a little straighter and were watching Vincent with hawk eyes. This was the first time they had ever dealt with a CIA agent. Yes, I'm his father. Putting his badge away, Vincent produced the video camera, holding it out to the officers. The video is here. It is the only one, as I just purchased the video camera yesterday. The one officer nodded, taking the video camera. Mr. Potter, may we speak with you? If you wish, your father may join you. Sephiroth shook his head. I'll be fine, I have nothing to hide, and the video would confirm all that I have to say. Moving towards the back kitchen where they could talk in a semblance of quiet, he smiled back to his father. He wanted to laugh so hard. This was so perfect. Remaining where he was, Vincent turned to look at the Dursley family, his right hand coming to rest on Cerberus' grip, an unmistakable show of power. Well, Petunia, it's been a while. I see you are doing well for yourself. Petunia was sputtering, as pale as a ghost as she looked at the man that was supposed to be dead. How? You're supposed to be dead? Vincent shook his head. I was in a coma for 3 years, and when I awoke I only had very vague memories. Not enough to realize I once had a wife and son. He laughed softly, shaking his head. Sounds like some horrible movie, but movies are based in some fact, are they not? So you have been alive the entire time that we have been stuck raising your good for? Vernon faltered from his quickly building rant when Vincent's eyes flashed and held gold for a few seconds before returning to their spelled hazel. If you call the abuse he suffered at your hands raising him. Vincent took a menacing step forward, his hand wrapping fully around the grip of his gun. You are damn lucky that I am not putting you all into the ground myself for what you did to my son. His voice was a very deadly purr. Don't you dare threaten my brother. Marge pushed her fat ass up out of the chair and moved over so that she was now standing directly in front of Vincent, her rancid alcohol breath nearly making him gag. So, deadbeat James Potter is miraculously back from the dead. Tell me, James, were you really in a coma, or did you simply run away from your responsibilities as a father? Not letting the drunken words of a fat old hag get to him, Vincent steeped back, a look of disgust crossing his face. Miss Dursley, before you get into someone's face and accuse them of matters you have no dealings in, might I suggest you place a tic-tac in your mouth? I do not have my biological suit on me at the moment. Genesis snorted from his spot against the banister. Vincent always cracked him up when he insulted someone. He did it in such a way that it normally took the person the better part of 5 minutes to figure out they had been insulted at all. Marge seemed like one of these that would take a very long time to figure out she had been insulted. If I had known sooner where my son was once I regained enough of my memories to realize I had a son, I would have been here by Harry's 12th birthday, but it was not until this past summer that I gained knowledge that my son was in fact alive and attending the school his mother and I had. I have been staying in the village outside the school since the beginning of term. Marge snorted, not noticing the paling faces of the 2 elder Dursleys in the room. So you have been outside St. Brutus's, probably getting drunk every night. Resisting the urge to roll his eyes, Vincent kept his complete calm, currently hazel eyes unblinking as he regarded the woman in front of him. Mom, I do not know what notions you have cooked up in the vast cavity that was supposed to house your higher cognitive functions. Drinking is something I have never taken up and never will, though. I cannot say the same for yourself. Marge actually growled at him, straightening herself up in an arrogant fashion and failing horribly at it. Epic fail. Genesis muttered, moving back as Harry and the officer headed upstairs. He smirked, seeing that evil smile in his beloved's eyes. Oh, this was going to be good. Mr. Potter, Petunia told us all about you. Drunken, unemployed, worthless waste of human flesh. Tilting sideways, Vincent looked at Petunia, who looked 3 seconds from passing out. Raising a single questioning brow, he turned back to Marge. I see she also forgot the fact that my family is very old money and no one in my family has had to work in generations, as the Potter fortune is very vast. A small smile pulled at his lips, seeing Marge's eyes going wide. Though if I were you I would not speak about drunken and unemployed. Considering you reek of the foul liquid as we speak, and according to my file, you live at home. Alone. Breeding bulldogs. Not many would consider that gainful employment. Marge was actually sputtering, her face turning a brilliant shade of puce. She didn't have a chance to respond as one of the officer came back into the living room. Mr. Dursley. Standing, Vernon moved over to the officer, his own face speech red in his fury at watching his sister get shot down at every turn. I want you to remove these men from my home. I'm afraid I cannot do that. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. The officer pulled out his cuffs, but thought better of those at the sheer size of the man. Instantly all color drained from Vernon's face, hearing he was under arrest. What for? The officer forcefully grabbed his hand, cuffing one before attacking a second set of cuffs to them and then a third before he could reach his other hand. You are under arrest for suspicion of child neglect and child abuse. Petunia stood up with a screech for them not to take her husband. The two enhanced flinched as it pierced their ears. Stepping back into the hallway, Vincent looked up to where his son was standing, his face perfectly blank of all emotions, though his eyes were dancing with a fire similar to Niblime. This was his vengeance for 14 years of neglect and abuse, and he didn't pop his killing cherry. There was enough evidence across the house, held just in his room, to prove Vernon's guilt, and that was a very sweet Christmas present. Mr. Potter, will we be able to contact you for a court date? The one officer moved up to the stairs. You will have to contact me. My son will be in school and I'm afraid the boarding school he attends is very strict and does not allow calls during the term. Pulling out a business card, he handed it to the officer before the officer left. Harry, you ready to leave this place forever? Goddess, yes. The ministry can kiss my ass, I'm not staying here a minute longer. Turning, Sephiroth bolted up the stairs, mini materia in hand for his trunk. One beautiful thing about materia is the ministry couldn't trace it, so he could use it to his heart's content. He ran down a moment later, trunk already placed into the pocket of his leather pants. He had the order headquarters address written on a piece of paper and handed it to his father. Memorize that. Jen, burn it when you're done. Sweeping his eyes over it, Vincent took the information in at a glance and handed it to Genesis, who in turn swept his gaze over it before calling forth his materia and incinerating the paper. Marge and Piers jumped, seeing the show of magic, their eyes huge as they looked at the group. Oh, Marge. I don't attend a school for criminal boys. I attend a boarding school for witches and wizards. Just as my mother and father did. Piers stood up, his eyes wide as he looked at the freak in front of him. Bullshit, Potter. What are you, some Chris Angel freak? Genesis snickered at that, since he knew Chris Angel personally and he was a very fantastic and powerful wizard. He just liked to mind fuck moles. You could say that, considering Angel is a wizard. Genesis shrugged but smirked, seeing Sephiroth move out a little, holding up his left hand. He held it up parallel with the floor, pulling on the Genova cells in his body. He called forth his beloved Masamune. In a flash of brilliant green light, the 7-foot Nodaki appeared in his hand, causing Marge and the others to leap back in shock. Smirking darkly, Sephiroth recalled the sword, causing it to simply vanish into thin air. Turning back to his father and lover, he nodded to them. I'll go first to make sure no one tries to attack you. And with that he simply vanished into thin air. Ah. Genova cells. They are actually good for one thing. Genesis smirked before flipping the remaining Dursleys off. Merry Christmas everyone. And he simply vanished just as Sephiroth had. Shaking his head, Vincent pulled on his Chaos cells, allowing him to teleport in a similar fashion to his son and Genesis. What the fuck did I just see? Piers whispered Jaw somewhere in China.
I'm glad you enjoyed that video / gameplay. Just remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. Until next time, goodbye!